Hi, this is Chef Bill with the Culinary Institute of America. It's the height of summer right now. When you go to the farmer's market, you're going to see the most delicious, beautiful produce, and it's going to be inexpensive. You should take advantage of that and put some away for later on in the fall and the winter when you just wish you had some of that produce. What we're going to talk today about is canning. The CIA put together a book called Preserving, and there's a lot of great information in here about preserving vegetables and fruits, but I'd like to walk you through the process so that you can see that it's not as difficult as you might think. Everybody's concern is that if you get it wrong, it can be dangerous, and that's true. So I want to show you all the speed bumps that you should avoid. To begin with, I have some beautiful beans here. We're going to can these beans. I've got some jars that we're going to can them in, and the jars have had boiling water poured over them, and that sterilizes them. That's an important step. I took that jar out with a pair of tongs, but maybe you've seen something like this, which makes the job even a little bit easier. You want to be careful with this. Obviously it's glass, and these just need to sit in boiling water for 5 minutes so that they're sterile. All right, I also have the lids, and those have been heated up as well. The reason for heating the lids is not just to make them sterile, but also to soften the rubber gasket on the top. And you can see that gasket right here. Soften that gasket so it seals even a little bit better. Okay, now, with these jars in place, I want to tell you that there's two different kinds of canning. One is a raw pack, and the second is a hot pack. Imagine that I was going to pack some green beans into this jar. If I were to cook them first, the way that I have them here, and then I pour hot brine over the top, and then I process them in boiling water, they could get maybe a little bit too soft. And so I'm going to practice what I call a raw pack, where I take the beans raw. These have been cleaned. I washed them. I took the stem end off, and I need to cut them just a little bit shorter so that they fit into the jar. We want to leave about 1/2 inch of head space at the top of the jar. And you can pack the vegetables in here pretty tightly, because as they cook, they will shrink a little bit and soften. I'm also going to introduce a clove or two of garlic. Maybe I'll just take this one clove and cut it in half. And we'll take a branch or two of dill and just tuck that into the jar as well. It's probably not a bad idea to get a lot of beans. Do 8 or 10 jars at a time. Maybe you do 2 or 3 different vegetables. We need a pickling liquid to go over the top of these beans. Typically it's water and vinegar and then pickling spices or garlic or pepper flakes. What I have here is water and vinegar with a little bit of sugar and salt. I've got mustard seeds, pepper flakes, and garlic in here. I'm going to add this while it's hot, while it's boiling, and this will start the process of cooking these vegetables. So let me ladle this hot brine right in. Don't be shy about putting in another clove or two of garlic, and make sure you get some mustard seeds. And you want to leave about 1/2 inch of headspace, which is a small amount of room at the top of the jar, which will help guarantee that we get a nice tight seal. So I handled these jars with my hands. They're not that hot. Certainly this water is boiling, but as I add this, it's not that much of a problem. If you're concerned, there's always rubber gloves that you could wear, or you could wrap a towel around this, or just let it sit here on the countertop. All right, now, before we put the lid on, make sure that the rim of the jar is clean. You don't want anything on the rim of the jar. And then you take this sterile lid and you put that into place. You put the collar on the jar and just screw it on, not very tightly, just until it meets a little bit of resistance. Okay, so those two are ready to be processed. What we're trying to do here is make sure that what's inside this jar is sterile, and the way we're going to do that is in a hot water bath. I have a big pot of boiling water right here. This is a special pot designed just for canning, and if you look, it has a little cradle that can hold jars so that they can be lowered into the pot. It also holds the jars up off the bottom of the pot so that as it boils, the jars don't bang around on the metal pot and ultimately break. So if these are too hot to handle, you can use this. Take it and bring it over and just put it into that cradle. 1, 2, and here's some that I have ready to be processed as well. And once the jars are in place, make sure there's a little room for the water to circulate around. And then we're going to lower this down. You want the jars to be covered by about an inch of water. You bring it back to the boil, and a lid will help with that, and boil it for 8 or 10 minutes. And what that will do is sterilize the contents. Now, when you're doing pickling like this in a high acid solution, you don't have to worry too much about botulism, which is the concern that everyone has with canned foods. Botulism does not like acidity. Whenever you're canning things in vinegar, you don't really have to worry about botulism. It's a non-issue. If you are canning things like meat or tuna, then it's a very different issue, and there's a special high pressure canning technique that's used for those things. All right, our beans have been processing now for a full 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes. And what I'm going to do first is turn the heat off, and I'm going to reach in here, and we're going to lift these up and out and let them rest right here on the side of the pot. Now, what's happened while these have been cooking is that the pressure is built up inside these jars, and any extra air has been forced out of the jar. We don't want any air in those jars because that's just no good for what we're doing here. All right, so there's one jar out. The reason that we did not tighten these down too severely is that we wanted the air to have the opportunity to escape. We let them sit here on the counter, and over the course of about 10 minutes, as they begin to cool and the pressure inside the jar begins to subside, it will suck the lid down and you'll hear a pop as the lid seals very, very tight. At which point you can tighten down the collars all the way, label these so you know when they were made and what they are, and then put them aside in your pantry side by side with your vegetables, your carrots, your cauliflower, whatever it might be. It's as simple as that. Let's give these a little bit of time alone so that they can finish this process of canning.